Welcome everybody to the latest Geek Out. I am not Friday the 13th. I'm not scary. I'm not going to start coming after you with an axe, none of that stuff. But our great graphic artist, Matt Hebb, did a great job kind of integrating the theme of today's session into a kind of Halloween flavored mask, which is kind of fun. So I'm not super into horror movies, but I've seen that before, and it actually looked pretty realistic. So I thought that was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it's pretty good.
But today we have a special guest. Today we have Mr. Chris Gallamore with us on the program. So Chris, go ahead and introduce
Hi,
yourself.
everyone. Yeah, hello, everyone. I've been on before. I think this is my third one, but yeah. So you can go back and look for mine in the Geek Out archives, I suppose, Steve. But
The archives, the
so it's
Wayback
good.
Machine.
Yeah, it's good to be working with you again, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to be talking about Hyper-V today. And in the If I Had a Nickel category, I know that when we were at VMware Explorer, one of the most common questions we got was, hey, we're not really sure what's going on with VMware. I'm not sure they're really sure about what's going on with VMware. I think they're going to figure it out. That's my personal opinion. But people were asking, hey, in case they don't figure out, what do we do? So fortunately, VM supports a number of different hypervisors. And so what I thought we would do, or what we thought we would do, is present one of the alternatives and kind of show you how Hyper-V integrates with VMstore, kind of what Hyper-V is, if you're not familiar with it. And so we brought on Chris, who is our resident Hyper-V guy for the day, to
Yep,
go
for the day.
through,
Thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
to go through kind of an overview of what Hyper-V is, and then to show you some tips and tricks about how to use it on a VM store. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so that's a great kickoff. So what we were trying to do, and Steve kind of highlighted that, is there's obviously there's a disruptor here, a market disruption here with Broadcom. Really, so I know people are basically seeing pricing from 3x to 5x to maybe even more than that, what they were expecting to see with this shift from subscription over to subscription licensing. So we're seeing that right now, and we're seeing customers struggle with that. We, like Steve said, we still believe in VMware. We still believe it's clearly the most predominant hypervisor out there, and it clearly is the easiest to work with and the best. But we wanted to see what we've always been at Tintri. We've always been able to support multiple hypervisors. And this is a great opportunity, we think, for people that are looking at other alternatives to test it out on Tintri, because Tintri just makes them all easier to use, and you get all the Tintri features essentially that give you that simplicity and that ease of use back with your managing your infrastructure. So when you're looking at evaluating your options that you have here, we're talking about, do we just continue with VMware? Do we switch to another hypervisor platform? Do we just throw the whole thing out and move out to the cloud, go to maybe a VMware based cloud provider, or or Azure, or one of the hyperscalers? Then HCI, that's not really a different option necessarily, because you're considering a hyper-converged solution. But that could be a different hypervisor, in some cases. And then modernize with KubeVirt. So one of the things that Tintri is doing is we're obviously starting to support containers in the next release, and we're looking at the ability to manage virtual environments within Kubernetes, very similar to what we do with managing VMware VMs, or any VMs out there today. So these are kind of the options you have. And so when
by the way, Chris, just not to interrupt, but I think we do have a polling question around this topic.
Okay.
We wanted to get
some
opinions from folks on kind of what their plans are, because we always like to know, it helps us too, to try to figure out, what direction people are going in. So if Mr. Producer, there we go, there's the poll. So especially number 2, which is kind of topical to what we're doing here.
Right.
In terms of, and you can pick multiple ones here. Which ones are you considering? This is actually really good feedback for us because when we try to support other types of hypervisors, if we don't already support them, and some of them are ones we already support here, we'd like to know what people are looking at. So, for example, Proxmox is something that comes out of people's mouths a lot these days.
Yeah.
Kind of limited in scope, but I think it has some potential, right? So
Why
it's
do
one
you
of
think
those
they
things
put
where,
Hyper-V first, Steve?
why do they put Hyper-V first?
Yeah. And
Well, I think it randomizes for everybody.
okay, I see.
So I think I see Hyper-V first. But
Yeah,
I
okay.
think it's like one of those tests where you know, like the SAT where it randomizes.
Yeah, I see.
Um, yeah, so if you don't mind, those are out there to fill that in. And by the way, I was remiss to mention, the reason why some of you keep coming back all the time is not necessarily to see my face or Chris's face or to see the technology that's out there. We do a giveaway as part of the program. And the thing that we give away is a branded Nintendo Switch OLED with our little logo on the back. So it's super cool with the right colors and all that kind of good stuff. So you're by attending here and registering, you're already entered. So after the program's over, we'll let you know if you won. So just keep an eye out. Make sure you check your spam filter. Very important. Um, so do we have results on the poll? Let's get some results here. By the way, we do have an international flavor today. We have Akib from Doha, Qatar, is here today. Super cool. So I don't know if it's the middle of the night there. That's pretty crazy. Okay, so the results are. So the increase in cost looks like pretty significant. So the most common answer was between 1 and 3x. We're not going to talk about licensing here on this show. I think there's some reasons why that is. And like I said, I think my personal opinion is I think they're gonna get that fixed. But the second one is really interesting. So about half of the people said they're considering Hyper-V. So I guess this is a very good
Poignant.
topic for today. Zen server is very high as well. Proxmox about 1 out of 5. XCP-ng, so you can kind of lump that in with Zen server because that's the open source version. So if you combine those two, you're looking at over half, that's a really interesting piece of data. And we do have support for Zen server. XCP-ng does work on our platform as well. We treat it the same. It's the APIs are the same. So that's cool. So this is really good information. So thanks for those who answered. Appreciate it. We got some good feedback there. So thank you. So Chris.
And we'll see it. We can see a little bit of that in the demo. Some of the support for the other hypervisors. We'll see that right at the start of the demo. So, but yeah, that's obviously something that we're working hard and fast on to get that capability. But today, Steve, you could test it out. You could test out any of these today because they all work right now. So yeah, so some of the things to think about when you're thinking about your change, evaluating what you would like to do with this shakeup here. So, considering, VMs must be migrated. If you're going to be actually migrating to a new hypervisor, you're going to need to migrate those somehow, right? And there's very few options. We're going to talk about Hyper-V and how you would migrate those, but there's no live migration between different virtualization, obviously. So you're going to have to take downtime to make that happen. So it's good to have, a good planning, testing, implementing timeline to make sure that you're not going to, take more downtime than you need to. So, what we think is that you really need to have the ability to run side by side with VMware. So as you are moving, and maybe you just want to move some of the easiest, smallest workloads first, correct? You may want to move your test dev operations. They're okay, maybe, or less concerned about having that downtime. So you're probably going to need to have that side-by-side capability. And we're going to show that also in the demo, how we're running these multiple hypervisors next to one another and even within the same service groups. And considering how much time and effort it's going to take you and what the overall architecture is of the solution. So including your DR and backup strategies. So what are some of the other alternatives? I mean, we just showed them and it looks like you all are already looking at those. So we can probably skip over this slide and start digging into Hyper-V. But like we said, we're really working hard on building the capability to work with any of these. You know, right now we can certainly do Hyper-V. We're going to show you that, and we can do Zen based, and we can show you how we would work with KVM based as well. So Hyper-V. So what is happening right now with Hyper-V? Because there were rumors out there that it was going to go away. And I think as it exists today, in terms of the free versions and things like that, it will change. So it will end of life. Hyper-V, as we know it, will end of life in 2029. It's going to be called something else, probably Azure Stack Hypervisor or something along those lines. But it'll still exist as a role as it does today. It runs right now in the Windows kernel as a role. So that's how it'll continue to do that. So I think you can safely look at migrating to it and have a path for the future by staying with Hyper-V. Would you agree, Steve, or do you think that there's a risk there?
No, I think that's true, and they've been fairly public about extending that support beyond the official EOL date. So I don't think that's a concern necessarily. So if you're looking at a 5-year plan, I think that fits at least within that 5-year plan and probably a little bit beyond. And I think the other thing that happens is, you know how Microsoft is. If they see that something is trending or is working, they're going to probably put more resources into it. So I think it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? If people start to use it more, they may shift out that EOL. You know, as we know, plans change.
Right. And they may charge more for it too. So,
and they might.
Who knows what happens in 5 years? Everything will be different in 5 years. So at least for the foreseeable future, we've got an option here. So, and we're going to drill into, I just wanted to point out that it is a type 1 hypervisor. I think that just means that, obviously people know what that is. It's running directly on the bare metal. It's not running on top of some other operating system. But it almost appears as if it is when you set it up, because it's so tightly integrated with Windows that you have to have Microsoft System Center set up in order to run it and manage it. So, but all of this will be easier if you stick with Tintri or you buy Tintri, because it's going to be we really make it easy, and we're going to show you how easy it is, particularly in the demo. So some of the feature sets, and I'm sort of starting to prepare you for comparing this with VMware. Everything you can pretty much do in VMware, you can do in Microsoft. So there's live migration, there's storage live migration. There are, replication, asynchronous, synchronous replication for disaster recovery, checkpoints, or, the snapshots, you can use those. It's a lot easier to use storage-based snapshots, just like it is with VMware, but all your basic feature sets are very similar. There are some that, if you get integrated with some of the orchestration tools and things like that with VMware, there's definitely more depth to the VMware portfolio. But for the purposes of day-to-day management and what most of, especially smaller customers that would be considering this, this is definitely I would say an enterprise class solution that you could count on. So some of the key points or differences between Hyper-V and VMware, I think VMware is clearly more lightweight. Just not having to install another platform like System Center, is nice and simple. There's a difference between PowerShell versus command line for Hyper-V versus VMware, but not really significant difference there. Again, it's kind of a near feature parity with regards to the basics. So integration with storage vendors and Tintri in particular. So basically the Hyper-V uses what they call ODX versus VAAI. So that's going to give you those capabilities, and we're going to demonstrate these. So that's going to give you the ability to clone a VM in Tintri and then run it in Microsoft. It's going to, if you want to offload some of those storage-based functions to the storage solution, that is available, and we're going to demonstrate it. It's a little easier to use in VMware and a little bit more clear, because you go into a VMware-based tool set to do a snapshot or something like that, so you're doing a Tintri snapshot. but we'll show you how that's done in Microsoft. So then we're going to show also a migration from VMware over to Microsoft, and we're going to use System Center. There's really three options. You can use MVMC, but it's not officially supported, although it works well. We've tried it. And, or SCVMM, which we'll show today, which works quite well. And then there's third-party tools you can also use to migrate to and from Hyper-V to VMware. So let's switch gears a little bit and just talk about Tintri. Steve, anything else you want to kind of bring up about Hyper-V or talk about Hyper-V before we go kind of talk about how Tintri does it?
No, I mean, I think you've summarized it quite well, actually.
Okay.
It's a very viable platform. I would say it's definitely number 2 behind the vSphere platform for us in terms of level of support, all that good stuff. So we worked hard to try to be as feature parity as we can be between this and VMware. I mean, there are some obvious differences between the technologies, and I think you talked about some of them, but the ecosystem and so forth. But in terms of just a bare hypervisor and getting things done, it's pretty viable. So.
Yeah. Okay. And we did argue a little bit about before this call, right? Or not argue. We had a discussion about the market share that Hyper-V has versus VMware. So we said 15 to 20%. It depends on who you ask and what kind of statistics you're using. It could be as low as 1%.
Yeah.
So because if you're just talking about the number of VMs out there, then it looks like it's about 15% or so. But are any of those in production? That type of thing. So it is.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. Yeah.
Yeah, really small market. But so what our kind of pillars or our vision for how we want to manage virtual workloads is we want to give you the ability to choose. So that's number 1. So we don't want to force you to use VMware or Hyper-V or anything like that. We want to try to support these equally as best we can and be hypervisor agnostic. So, and we want to stick with our core principles when we develop the product of performance predictability, ease of management, and simplicity, really. And that simplicity really is driven by visibility and the simplicity of management, right? So, so we're going to highlight those when we show, how we manage Microsoft. Now, building it out and all those things are considerably more complicated and, than they are with VMware, perhaps. So that we're kind of, some of that you're not going to see. And hopefully, Steve, we're thinking about trying to do a part 2 of Hyper-V that really drills into setup and connection and really getting set up with Hyper-V with Tintri. So perhaps we'll get that one out. But at this point, we're kind of just looking at, hey, this is how would you manage it on a day-to-day basis? And how
I will echo that, Chris. Getting it set up is very different than setting up ESXi, vCenter, all that stuff. It's completely different. So
yeah,
there can be a bit of a learning curve. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different, and maybe because I'm a VMware person, it seems more complicated, and I'm getting old. But
Are we all?
Yeah, but it definitely seems more complicated to me. It seems more less intuitive.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're a Microsoft person, that's not the case. So along the lines of freedom of choice, so we have this nice little slide that shows that we support everything in the world. So we'll show you what we support when we go into our hypervisor managers in the demo, but we're looking at supporting all of this. So right now we can definitely, without a doubt, support VMware and Hyper-V and Zen. So and the others we'll talk about. So we can also, the other nice thing is running your databases, your SQL databases directly off the Tintri. So if you have things like, you want to set up a dev environment and, or availability zones for your database, the type of thing, we can leverage our snapshot cloning to support that in a much, much more efficient way. And then that continues on with containers. So, and again, the philosophy is we want to run those containers alongside the VMs. So, and it doesn't matter what kind of hypervisor is running those VMs. So we want to give you everything in that freedom of choice bucket there.
By the way, we did do a Geek Out or two on the SQL integrated storage feature. So for those of you who are curious, you can go back into the Tintri Wayback Machine and check that out.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's super cool. So just a little bit back on, so we've built this file system to optimize for these objects. So we can provide, rather than building a volume, putting the VMs into the volume and then hoping that, we don't have to manage that much later on, we just manage by the virtual machine. So it gets rid of that blender effect. We do, in the case of VMware, per vdisk queuing, and in Microsoft, it's a similar methodology. So each VM is basically getting guaranteed resources and guaranteed sub-millisecond response time. So each virtual machine, or whether it's another object like a database or a container. So really, really important to have that predictable performance. And, so we isolate these workloads similar to, what a hypervisor does for compute. So each workload is completely isolated and doesn't get stepped on by the other workloads. And we can dynamically allocate those resources as they're needed, and even predictively. So you can, if we know that this VM needs additional resources at a certain time of day, we know how to spin those up for it and prepare for that. The visibility, the analytics is incredible. So most of the other solutions out there do not have real-time capability. They might look like real-time, but if you really start to troubleshoot and see what's going on, you're not going to be able to get that real-time view that you need when you're trying to fix something that's gone wrong with a VM. Like, even if it's the host or the hypervisor or whatever, you're not going to be able to find that nearly as quickly if you don't have real-time analytics. So we provide that, and we'll show that in the demo with the Hyper-V VMs. And then, and of course, accelerating your productivity by giving you time back in your day. And, whether it's DevOps or setting up a test environment, tearing it up, putting it down, doing backups, et cetera, all those things become much simpler when you know what the VM, when you're working with a VM, a logical object like that versus a LUN, which is an abstract object.
Key VM store differentiators.
So let's go to the demo.
Let's do it. Yes.
All right. We're doing
it's
great
demo
on
time. I like that.
What's that?
It's demo time.
Amen. Let's go. So I'm going to stop that share and start this share.
By the way, we have one frequent flyer who always uses a different name. And I just wanted to say, I see you working. I think I know who it is, but he uses a funny name. That would be funny to me and me only. So anyway, just a shout out. I see you working. I always enjoy scrolling through the names and seeing something like, okay. So
interesting. I don't know how you're able to see him working, but okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, typically when you're managing the VM store, when you first set it up, we're going to go in and we're going to add in those hypervisor managers, right? So this is what we wanted to show you. So if we go in, if we look at what the hypervisor managers are, we can see we have 3 vCenter VMware, we have 2 Hyper-V, and we can click on that and see what they are. You can obviously add another one if you need to. We have, Rev, OpenStack, Zen Server, Kubernetes. So you have pretty much, the things that we discussed, the capability of having all those different hypervisors. And for Hyper-V, we leverage SMB, and one of the big differences is sort of versus VMware is more object oriented. You're managing an object like a data store or or a data center, that type of thing. This is more path based, more like file system lingo type stuff. So the paths are set up for the shares for the Microsoft environment. So that, Steve, anything you want to add really on the setup there? I know that's very simplistic.
Yeah, if you go back to hypervisor managers, one of the first things that you'll notice is instead of connecting to a management platform like vCenter, for example, or SCVMM, you're actually connecting to the individual hosts here. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit different in terms of setup. So if you have a large environment, this can take a little bit of time. to get everything connected properly, because you're connecting to each individual host, because that's where the APIs call go, or API calls go from us to manage these things. So that's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah. So that, and there's two different management consoles, almost like when the VM store, if you manage it directly, that would be more like what we call the VM manager, Hyper-V manager. And then, or if that's good for like one host or two hosts, maybe a few, but not too many, because you lose some of the functionality and the ability to move from host to host and that type of thing. So most people, if you're doing an enterprise, you're going to be looking at SCVMM management, and we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But I want
that's the analogy there is vCenter versus the ESXi console, right?
Yeah.
And in our world, you connect to vCenter for managing VMware. That's where the API calls go. But in the Hyper-V world, you don't connect to SCVMM in the same way. You actually connect to the hosts, and you manage it through SCVMM. So it's a little bit different model.
Right. So, and I've got a couple of Hyper-V VMs running. They're highlighted here, but you can see, here's your object manager type, and you can hover just like you would hover over any VM. You're going to see all the all the latency and where it's coming from. So again, and that's real time. It's a real time view. So we're getting that view of what exactly is happening on that VM at any given time. So if we want to set up policies for these VMs. So if we want, we're doing the same thing we would do for any VM. So right now it's set to using the demo lab defaults for that system, but we can set up a snapshot schedule, replicate to another VM store, replications. And I've got this one here set, quality of service set. So I'll go ahead and free it up to go ahead and run, just so I can show you that it's real time. But yeah, and the QoS works on a Hyper-V VM. So basically you're managing exactly the same as you'd manage any other hypervisor at this stage. But so we'll see. I want to show you in Hyper-V Manager that these VMs, what I did here with these is I basically put an iometer running inside there. So each of these VMs is running that, so I can connect to them, and I can, just like you would with a VMware console or VM console. But yeah, I've got iometer running here to generate some load on this system. So that's all I'm really doing with these particular VMs. I want to just show you, you have this kind of capability where I can do a checkpoint like snapshot. I can move them, et cetera, from the Hyper-V console as well as SCVMM. So let's go back over. Oh yeah, so I changed this. So let's go into those metrics and just drill in. So into that VM, see if it freed it up by now. Let's see. Let's change what we're looking at here a little bit. Get 1 hour view maybe. So it's still showing 349. It's just the delay. There it goes. Sometimes it's a little bit delayed, but you're going to see, okay, it freed it up and it's letting it go now. So you can see, that was just really to show real time and the ability to control these Hyper-V VMs. Okay.
And that's not something everybody would use, right? So we do all of that automatically in the majority of cases. But if you need to control it for whatever reason, it's a really easy way to do that if that's required. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. I mean, probably the likelihood, I've had several customers use this for testing. So if you have a vendor that says, I'm going to need, 100,000 IOPS for this application, well, you could control that, right? You could say, okay, well, you only get 100,000 IOs or whatever it is. So we did that for a law firm where they were, some new software they installed was eating up all the resources, and we just put it in a box see what was happening. So it's really good for testing, but it can also be used just if you had a data warehouse or something that would use resources you didn't want it to use, or a test environment, dev environment, that type of thing. But the point here really being that it doesn't matter whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, or KVM or whatever, it's going to work the same. So that's good. So let's check out doing a snapshot on one of these VMs. So let's grab this one, I guess. And let's take a look at the snapshots. So we don't have any snapshots on this. So if I want to take a snapshot of this one, I'll just snap that. And let's call it Steve's Geek Out snapshot, maybe.
Well, Chris's Geek Out. This is your show.
All right, we'll call it CEG.
I'm just a visitor in your world today.
That doesn't look right, does it?
What's a snap? There we go.
I don't know what a snap is. That's a reference to a camp snap.
Okay. We'll go with it. All right. So it's taking an array-based snapshot at this point.
Yeah. And so this is a Tintri base. So let's go ahead and clone it while we're at it, so we can see if it shows up over there. How long that takes and all that. So I can do as many as I want, right? I'll do 2 of them just to show. This one is CEG's snap, or clone rather. Man, I'm having trouble today. There we go. It's the microphone too close.
There you go.
I'll blame
distracting.
it on that.
Exactly.
So we submit that, so we should be able to see that guy show up here.
And there they are. So before the UI even updated, they're already ready. Yep.
Yeah. So we can power those on.
And they were cloned from the snapshot that you just took. So
that's right.
These are very, very recent versions of that VM.
Yeah. So you probably wouldn't, you may do that if you're just setting up a test environment or something like that, but you can start it up. Turn it off, shut it down, connect to it, whatever you want to do. So we can go and connect to it. It's probably still booting up there. So, but so think about how simple that is, and how if you were to do that in pretty much any other technology, would you be able to do something like that? Like, let's say if someone just lost a file, or they just wanted to set up a quick test bed, try something out. It's very simple, instantaneous, basically, for you to do that. So that was a little bit just showing some Hyper-V manager there. I want to show one more thing here with this. Let me get it. Can't quite reach that. Okay. If I go back here, so I wanted to show a service group. So Steve, do you think you can add a Hyper-V VM and a VMware VM to a service group?
I think you might be able to.
I think you might be able to. So let's try it. Let's create one. All right, we'll add a new service group. We're going to call this Chris's service group. All right. So what do we call these? We call them Geek Out. Let's say it contains Geek Out. Uh-oh, typing again.
Well, it depends on your naming convention. So if you're using a naming convention as the filter, then yes. But you can also use the static manage objects and pick them individually if you want to. But we'll show the contains feature. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that
we're kind of throwing a wide net over it, right?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to catch one that's a VMware and one that's a Hyper-V. So let's see if we get them. So add that service group. Let's see what those manage objects are in there. So we got,
hey, look at that
Hyper-V there, and we can go in here and show what the hypervisor manager is. Let's see, the object manager type. I believe that's what it is. Yeah. So we got the one VMware database in there, and then all the Hyper-V VMs. So, and then, with any, just like service groups, you could put your settings and your snapshots and QoS and any kind of policies you would like on that. So just to show that the service groups are working correctly. So far we've,
and I think we
snapshots,
yeah, I'm sorry,
clones.
Chris.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think we us Tintri people that have been around for a while, I think we kind of gloss over how cool that is, right? So all of those objects, you would never know what hypervisor they're running on unless you opened up that column, right? They treat them all exactly the same. They get the same metrics, the same QoS. You can have them in the same service group, all of those things like you mentioned. But that is so interesting from an administrative point of view, especially as you're going through these transitions where you may want to have one cluster that's running Hyper-V and one that's running VMware because you're not sure which direction you're going to go in or if things are moving back and forth, right? Having this central console here that can see all those together is super powerful in that kind of instance. I just don't want to, I don't want to let that go because I think that's really interesting for this day and age.
Yeah. Well, we said that we were going to help you manage these and VMs side by side. So now we're actually grouping them together and saying, okay, it doesn't matter. You could have you could set the same policies, storage-based policies on these VMs, regardless of regardless of what hypervisor they're in. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Nobody else can do that. And that's just a really cool feature. And it's actually useful. It's very useful. If you have multiple VMs across hypervisors that are all part of the same application that need to be snapshotted at the same time or replicated to another VM store or to the cloud or wherever you're replicating, that gives you that control and capability. So let's now the exciting part. We're gonna try to move a VM from VMware over to Hyper-V.
I don't have a drum. I think we need a drum roll.
Dun, da, da, da. So now to do this, I'm going to show it in, System Center Virtual Machine Manager, SCVMM, because Steve has done a lot of work to set this up, and it works, and it looks really nice. So, so that you're essentially, what we did here was we went to the fabric and imported, the infrastructure, and imported a vCenter. So if you right click on vCenter, you can go add that vCenter, add another vCenter server. So you can go through that process. Once you add that, it's pretty simple. Once you add that in, Steve had to do some cleanup with networking, et cetera, but it's pretty simple if you've got everything set up correctly. The next thing you do is you go in and add the ESX hosts and clusters. So I just grabbed a cluster and added it in. So, and that gave me all of the ESXi hosts here. So then you drill in a little deeper and you go in, you can either go up here and pick on VMs or go down here, VMs and services. And I drill into that, and I'm going to go grab something from over here. Okay, where is, that one will work. Let's do all of them just so we make sure we get the right one. So Steve made a nice small one for us so we can migrate a smaller one. I also kind of wanted to show, so you can actually, from here, you can clone as well. So you can clone these VMs directly out of here. And if it's set up correctly, you can use ODX for that and offload that to Tintri. But we're going to try this migration. So let me grab that again.
By the way, just one pro tip. So if you do this at home or at your place of business, the one thing that may trip you up, which is a little bit different, is in the Hyper-V world, when you're connecting to these clusters, you have to make sure you go into each one of those ESXi hosts individually within this UI and import the certificate. So even if the certificate is self-signed on each one of these hosts, if that certificate isn't there in the Hyper-V world, it will not do what it needs to do. So that's a really easy step to miss. And so you'll get some kind of slightly cryptic errors about, hey, I can't do this. That's probably the reason. So just make sure you check those when you're doing the setup if you choose to go this direction.
Thanks, Steve. So we'll go ahead and migrate this guy. So we're going to migrate him from the ESX over to, let's go with number 2 here in the demo lab. Again, you're selecting a path rather than a data store. But you
and by the way, if you go back one screen, Chris, just real quick.
Yeah.
So the one thing that you'll notice here, there's a rating explanation at the bottom for the target that you picked. So if you pick post number 2 there, and there's a rating explanation. So if any of those certificate errors pop up, or if there is anything that will prevent this from working, it'll show up in that one tab. It says rating explanation. So if there's a reason why it wouldn't work, that's where it would be. So it's going to tell you, hey, I'm going to move this to an IDE bus, blah, blah, blah. But if there's, red X's, then it's like, hey, you got to fix something before this will work.
Thanks, Steve. So we set the path. And we just go next. And then we move it. So, and it takes a little bit of time to move. Because we're moving across the network here, moving this VM over.
And what I do like about this is it's actually very verbose about what it's doing. So it's a little bit better than what VMware will tell you. It'll be a little bit more descriptive of what's going on and how long it's going to take and all that kind of stuff, which I really like. As you can see there, it kind of gives you a Gantt chart of what it's going to do, and then gives you individual progress bars for each one of those steps. So I think that's really cool because in the VMware world, you only see that one progress bar. You're not really sure what it's doing. It may give you a little description, but this is nice. It kind of shows you the whole step Gantt chart-ish thing.
When it doesn't
when
it doesn't work, you don't know where it broke. It's stuck on 67%.
Right. Right. So I really like that. I mean, that's a feature that I think I would love to see that in VMware.
So and that you can drill. Yeah, you can actually see the status too. I thought you could see it here. Because I'm not in the right spot here. You'll see it here.
Yeah, there'll be job. Yeah, there's a job status. Yep. So you can see it as part of that list too. So there's a couple different ways you can look at it. So if VMware is watching, this is really cool. So get on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it says now it's completed, Steve.
Yes.
So what do? We power it on. Let's power it on. Is it going to work?
Let's do it. I think it probably will.
I know.
And that info, by the way, it's just telling you that it uses a different bus for the virtual disks when it converted it. So it says, completed with info. That's what that means. It's just basically saying, hey, by the way, we're changing the structure of this VM just slightly. But as you can see, CentOS is booting up. So that VM has been converted.
There's some interesting messages here, and I'm curious to see what you think, Steve. I have a theory on this. But when I'll wait till maybe it doesn't happen. We'll see. Maybe, but I think there's a gremlin in here.
Well, this particular VM, remember, was built for VMware. So it comes in, I think that's the message you're talking about. So it's basically trying to, VMware Tools is telling it, hey, wait a minute.
VMware Tools. That's it.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm not on VMware anymore. I can't talk to the hypervisor or what's going on. And it kind of just like, okay, I'm giving up now. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. I think if you uninstalled VMware Tools, that you before you migrated it, you wouldn't get that.
Yes.
I just want everyone to know that. So it's going to work.
Yes. It works. It's just, it kind of pauses a little bit to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not a VMware anymore.
There you go.
So,
yeah.
There it is.
So that Steve, I think concludes kind of the demo.
Okay.
So I don't know if we want to take some questions maybe and see if we want.
I would love that. Any questions from any of the audience? We greatly appreciate questions that we can answer about any topic that we've covered today, or maybe some other topic. Who knows? But we've got some other folks. We got somebody from Atlanta. Kalpesh.
Oh, nice.
Is on the line from Atlanta. Thanks, Kalpesh. We have Marcus from Dallas, up the road from me. Hi, Marcus. I mentioned Cutter earlier. We have Brandon from Central Ohio. Brandon's a frequent flyer. Krista from Washington, D.C. A Vol fan living in Gulf Shores, Alabama. Hi, Clay. Nice. It is football season, so we got to say who
Yeah.
are who we're rooting for, I guess.
That's a tough place to be a Vol fan.
Oh, Alabama, especially this week.
Yeah.
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 That's true. That's true. So we'll just wait for questions here. So, in your estimation, Chris, what do you see your customers doing? Have they kind of given you a clue as to what direction they're taking?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. We're seeing everybody evaluating everything because they're concerned about the pricing. So a lot of my customers either had licensing for another year or two, or had something, or got some kind of setup. But I'm seeing like a bell curve. Like there's some people are like, I'm getting off VMware. I'm done. I can't believe they're doing this to me. I was loyal to them for 20 years. Those kinds of reactions. And then, then on the other end of the bell curve is like, I'm staying with VMware no matter what. I've invested too much in my infrastructure. I'm using all the tools, the orchestration tools and SRM, et cetera. And then most of the people in the middle evaluating, what do we do here? We need a plan. And that's when I think they're looking at the cloud as a possibility. And we didn't talk about cloud, but Sam Newton did a great job last Geek Out with you, Steve, on that as a possibility, because you can just pick up and go straight to the cloud. If it's a VMware based cloud like what we have with TCP, that's a great option for the cloud. Then if you're going to evaluate some other hypervisors, you have an excellent platform here with VMware to go ahead and do that and start it up just like we did for this Geek Out. So that's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing, Steve?
Yeah, I'll give Sam a shout out to his TCP Geek Out that he did recently. If you guys want to look that one up, that was a really good one. And so if that is absolutely an option that people are considering for sure, to kind of push that licensing cost up to the VCSPs, the cloud providers. And I think that's going to be a real focus of what VMware is trying to do going forward. Again, my speculation, I don't have any inside information, but I think they are going to figure this stuff out. And I think that's one of the main possibilities is to get people to go with some of these cloud offerings that are VMware specific. And that way, moving things back and forth between any on-prem environment you may still have and the cloud environments become really easy because it's on the same platform. You don't have to do any kind of massaging or refactoring or any of that stuff. Most of my customers are on the large side, so I deal with more enterprise customers. And for me, I don't want to name names, but I have some fairly large ones, and they are all kind of in the evaluation stage. They're all in different time frames in terms of when their ELAs for the perpetual model will expire. So some are a little bit more advanced than others, and kind of where they are on that journey. But I have not had one of my customers tell me that they're ditching VMware on-prem yet. That's not something I've heard. Doesn't mean it won't happen. But that's not something I've heard so far. I think people are still kind of waiting and seeing about how this whole licensing model is going to work out. And the urgency is not quite there in some of the cases, because like you said, you've got some customers that are maybe a year out, right? So they're using this time as a kind of a buffer to say, okay, maybe I'm going to spend 6 months to try to figure this out. And in one case, the customer went to a month-to-month subscription model, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's going to buy them time to figure, instead of signing a 3-year, length agreement, they're just doing it month to month to figure out, okay, do I want to sign that 3-year or not? Right? It's almost like a trial period. It's a little bit more money in absolute terms, but it worked for them. So that's the only one that I've seen that really had to make a shift of some kind. The rest of them are still kind of in kind of evaluation mode. So
and I could see if it were me, I might leverage something like Hyper-V for test dev, something like that, which would save some licensing on that, and keep my production on VMware.
Sure. Absolutely.
Gentlemen, we've got a question from Thomas in the chat about a plugin for SCVMM.
Oh, so the Tintri plugin for SCVMM. I don't think we were prepared to show that today, Chris. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have that in there right now. So
right.
But
good question.
That's what we were talking about earlier about how we can set that up in just like you would with vCenter. You'd have the same type of thing. Tintri options to do snapshotting, et cetera, directly from SEVMM.
Right. I think if we were to do a part 2, that'd be a good thing to explore. So yeah, we could do some of the setup stuff and then maybe some of the more advanced features that we didn't have time to get into today. So great suggestion, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thomas is international too. So
yeah,
I think that's Thomas Bartz, I think from Germany.
Yeah,
I think.
That's right.
I think that's the right Thomas. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So yeah. Any other questions from anybody out there while we have a few minutes left? We'll just kind of leave it open. Any thoughts about favorite video games? So I asked Chris before the show, I said, what's your favorite video game? So I put Miss Pac-Man on in the background for him. So he was very excited about that. I don't want to derail the Hyper-V conversation, but
is that running on Hyper-V back there?
It's not, but it could, theoretically.
Yeah.
Theoretically, yes. So Brian Hardy says, don't get me started about games. Paul says, so many from when I was growing up. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We're all well, I shouldn't say we're all children of the 80s. I think some of us are. Me personally, Chris, we were just talking before the show about Atari 2600 / VCS, all that stuff. I mean, it was, you know, oh, now I started it. Oh geez. So now I got the video games popping up. Virtual Cop. Oh, good gravy. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. No, but that's always a fun topic. So, okay. So I don't see any other Hyper-V questions. Chris, do you have anything that you'd like to say in conclusion that we haven't already said?
No, just thanks so much for everything, Steve, for helping me out and getting it all going. Thank you, Matt, for setting everything up, and everybody for attending.
Yes, big shout out to Mr. Producer, Matt Olson. He always does a great job. And thank you to all of you for showing up every time. We appreciate it. Again, don't forget, make sure you check your spam folder, please. Because if we want to give you one of these and we're not able to reach you for whatever reason, we might have picked somebody else. And we really don't want to do that if we pick you. So it is a random process. So we don't fix it. We're not those people. So I think we gave away like 3 in a row to people in Ohio. It was kind of crazy how that turned out. But in fact, some of them are still coming back, even though we gave them a switch. So glad to see those names on there. So yeah, so thanks everybody. Watch your emails and social media, especially LinkedIn, for some announcements about when the next Geek Out will be. We don't have a topic as of now, I don't think. But Hyper-V Part 2, maybe? I don't know. We'll throw it out there.
Yeah.
Maybe
something else.
If we get, we might mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, so thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you guys next time on Geek Out.